After 3 years as his best employee, he promoted someone else, so she quit, and he chased her. The email arrived at 4:47 inches the afternoon, and it took exactly 11 seconds to end 3 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and silent hope. Maria read the subject line twice before her hands began to shake. Congratulations to our new regional director, Daniel Foster. She had trained Daniel herself 8 months ago when he couldn't even format a spreadsheet, and now he was her boss. If you believe hard work should be rewarded, if you believe loyalty still matters in this world, smash that like button right now, drop a comment telling me you're watching, share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to Golden Buzzer World Official. Because stories like Maria's deserve to be seen. Now, let's get into it. Maria Alvarez was 26 years old when she walked into Harrison Logistics for her first day as a junior operations coordinator. She remembered the smell of fresh carpet and the nervous flutter in her stomach as she shook hands with her new manager, a sharp-eyed man named Richard Harrison, the founder's son, who had recently taken over daily operations. He was tall, serious, and spoke in short, efficient sentences. But there was something in the way he looked at her resume that felt different from every other interview she'd sat through. He told her that day that he didn't care where she came from or what school she attended. He cared about results. Maria promised herself she would give him results he would never forget. And she did. For 3 years, Maria was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She rebuilt the entire shipment tracking system from scratch after the old one crashed during the company's biggest contract renewal, working through 2 consecutive weekends without complaint. She smoothed over a disaster with their largest client when a shipment went missing, personally driving to the warehouse at midnight to track down the error herself. She trained 6 new hires, mentored 2 of them through personal crises, and never once asked for recognition. She believed, quietly and stubbornly, that if she simply kept doing the work, kept showing up, kept proving herself, the recognition would eventually come on its own. She believed Richard saw her. She believed he understood exactly what she carried on her shoulders for that company. She was wrong, or at least it felt that way on the day the email arrived. Daniel Foster was charming in the way that people who have never truly struggled are often charming. He had joined the company only 8 months earlier, fresh from an MBA program, with a firm handshake and a talent for saying the right thing in meetings, even when he understood only half of what was being discussed. Maria had been the one asked to show him the ropes. She had patiently explained the client relationships she had spent years building, walked him through systems she had designed herself, and answered his late-night messages when he panicked before big presentations. She did this not out of ambition, but because that was who she was. She helped people. She always had. When the promotion was announced, something inside Maria did not break loudly. It broke quietly, the way ice cracks beneath still water, invisible until the whole surface gives way. She sat at her desk for a long time after reading the email, staring at the cursor blinking on an unfinished report, and she thought about every missed dinner with her mother, every canceled weekend, every night she had told herself that the sacrifice was temporary because something better was coming. She thought about the promise she had made to herself on her very first day, the promise that hard work would eventually be seen. She did not cry at her desk. She waited until she got home, sat down on the edge of her bed in her small apartment, and let herself feel every bit of it. Then she opened her laptop and wrote a resignation letter that was polite, professional, and utterly final. She did not mention Daniel. She did not mention feeling betrayed. She simply thanked Richard for the opportunity and stated that her last day would be in 2 weeks, as required by her contract. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something close to peace, even as her chest ached with grief for the version of herself who had believed so completely in being noticed. Richard read the email the next morning at his desk, and for a long moment he simply stared at it, unable to process what he was seeing. His first instinct, the instinct of a man who had spent his life measuring worth in spreadsheets and quarterly targets, was confusion. Maria was, without question or debate, the backbone of his operations team. Losing her would be like losing the foundation of a building while still expecting the walls to stand. But beneath the confusion was something sharper, something that made his stomach twist uncomfortably, the creeping realization that he had made a mistake he could not undo simply by asking her to stay. He called her into his office that same afternoon, and the conversation that followed was the first real conversation they had had in months, maybe longer. He asked her why she was leaving, though he already suspected the answer. Maria, calm and steady in a way that surprised even her, told him the truth. She told him she had waited 3 years to be seen, and instead, she had watched someone with 8 months of experience step into a role she had quietly, desperately hoped would one day be hers. She told him it wasn't about the title or even the money. It was about feeling invisible after giving everything she had. Richard sat in silence for a long moment after she finished speaking, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely lost for words. He offered her a counteroffer within the hour, a bump in salary and a vague promise of future opportunities. But Maria had heard vague promises before, and she had built her entire career on the wreckage of believing them. She declined. 2 weeks later, she cleared out her desk, said quiet goodbyes to the coworkers who had become something like family, and walked out of Harrison Logistics for the last time without looking back. The weeks that followed were harder than she expected. She had structured her entire identity around being someone's best employee, and without that title, without the deadlines and the late nights and the sense of being needed, she felt strangely unmoored, as though she had lost not just a job, but a piece of herself. She spent her days sending out applications, staring at ceiling fans at 3 inches the morning, and wondering if she had made a mistake driven by pride rather than wisdom. Her mother, a woman who had raised Maria alone and understood sacrifice better than most, told her gently one evening that sometimes walking away isn't about anger. It's about finally choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. Maria held on to those words even when she didn't quite believe them yet. Meanwhile, at Harrison Logistics, the cracks began to show almost immediately. Daniel, for all his charm, did not know the systems Maria had built. He did not know which clients needed a gentle hand and which needed firm deadlines. Within 3 weeks, a shipment error nearly cost the company its largest contract, the very client Maria had personally saved once before. Richard found himself fielding panicked calls late into the night, doing the very work he had once trusted Maria to handle without a second thought. He began to understand, in the most painful way possible, that Maria hadn't simply been doing a job. She had been holding an entire structure together with quiet, unacknowledged strength, and now that structure was buckling in her absence. If this story is already touching something in you, I want you to type the word loyalty in the comments right now, because what happens next is the moment everything changes. It was on a rainy Thursday evening, almost 6 weeks after Maria's last day, that Richard finally understood he could not simply fix this with an email or a phone call. He drove to her apartment building without calling ahead, something entirely out of character for a man who planned every meeting down to the minute. He stood outside her door for a long moment before knocking, rehearsing words that still felt inadequate, no matter how he arranged them. When Maria opened the door and saw him standing there, soaked from the rain, she felt a strange mixture of vindication and exhaustion. Richard did not launch into a business pitch. He did not talk about titles or salaries. Instead, he told her, plainly and without polish, that he had been wrong. He admitted that he had taken her loyalty for granted precisely because it had always been so reliable, so quietly present, that he had stopped seeing it as something rare. He told her that promoting Daniel had been a mistake born of assumption rather than merit, an assumption that Maria would simply always be there, steady and unshaken, regardless of how she was treated. He said that in the weeks since she left, he had finally understood what she had been carrying all along, because now he was drowning, trying to carry even a fraction of it himself. Maria listened without interrupting, arms crossed, rain dripping from his coat onto her doorstep, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite forgiveness yet, but the beginning of something honest. She told him that an apology, however sincere, could not undo 3 years of feeling unseen. Richard nodded and told her he wasn't there to undo the past. He was there to ask for a chance to build something different, a partnership rather than a hierarchy, a role that reflected not just her skills, but her worth, and a company that finally understood the difference between using someone's loyalty and honoring it. He offered her the regional director position itself, the very role that had gone to Daniel, along with a formal apology to the entire team and a restructuring of how promotions would be decided going forward, built on transparency rather than assumption. Maria did not answer immediately. She told him she needed time to think, and to her quiet surprise, Richard simply nodded, said he understood, and walked back out into the rain without pushing further, which somehow meant more to her than anything he could have said. 3 days later, Maria walked back through the doors of Harrison Logistics, not as the woman who had once quietly hoped to be noticed, but as someone who had learned, painfully and completely, that her worth was never up for someone else's approval. She accepted the role, but on her own terms, terms that included boundaries she had never dared to set before. The company changed after that, slowly but unmistakably, and so did Richard, who never again mistook someone's quiet dedication for something he was entitled to. Before we close this story, I want to ask something small, but important. If Maria's story touched you even a little, if it reminded you of your own quiet sacrifices, or the moment you finally chose yourself, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to Golden Buzzer World Official, because these stories only reach more people who need them when you do. And I want you to do one more thing before you go. Down in the comments, I want you to write the words, "She deserved it," because Maria's story isn't really about one company or one promotion. It's about every person who has ever given everything to something, only to wonder if anyone noticed at all. Sometimes walking away is the only way to finally be seen, and sometimes the people who took us for granted only understand our worth once we're gone. If you've ever felt invisible after years of loyalty, know that your moment of being truly seen might be closer than you think. Thank you for watching. Until the very end. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that they matter, and I'll see you in the next story.